What's really behind all the fake anti-Russia hysteria? March 17, 2017, stateofthenation2012.com. Why so much naked propaganda and fake news directed against Russia, especially since Trump's election? The deep state now fears a partnership for peace between the United States and Russia more than anything else. It used to fear the natural alliance between Russia and Germany, since the Anglo-American domination of the world would be genuinely threatened by such a powerful geopolitical relationship. The two world wars were engineered to pit Russia against Germany in order to preclude such a bloc from forming. The same neocon cabal has been very busy setting up Europe for yet a third world war by manipulating Merkel's government against Putin's Kremlin. Immigrant crisis that began with the wars in the Middle East and North Africa was literally manufactured to destabilize Europe as a precursor to World War III. However, in the wake of the Trump presidency, deep state has now a much bigger problem, the very real prospect of a United States-Russian Federation entente. For this reason, the CIA and MSM, mainstream media, have been beating the war drums like never before. Russia has, overnight, become the whipping boy for everything wrong with the Democratic Party, as well as the scapegoat for every major intel security lapse in the USA. The U.S. intelligence community will continue to fabricate patently false stories about the Trump administration with respect to Russia as preemptive strikes to make any meaningful dialogue politically precarious. At the request of the CIA, the MSM will also continue to publish fake news and naked propaganda about the same in order to greatly inflame anti-Russian sentiment. Whenever the neocon cabal wants war, they pull out all the stops. However, in 2017, their new world order is under serious assault around the globe, and war has become an apparent necessity. Populist movements and nationalist revolutions are springing up like mushrooms across the planet. After the controlled demolition of the global economic and financial system, the cabal considers war, World War III, as their only real option, just as they created the Great Depression to set the stage for World War II. Inciting extreme Russophobia has always been their means to starting the real big wars. World War III will be no different unless Trump and Putin meet in broad daylight and declare deep state the archenemy of we the people everywhere. That's the short story. Now read on for the extended backstory. The entire anti-Russian campaign is being quite deliberately orchestrated at the highest echelons of deep state and the U.S. intelligence community. As usual, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, is coordinating the Russophobic propaganda campaign. The following data point explains why CIA is always so effective in this endeavor and institutionally oriented to forever conduct war propaganda campaigns distinguished by extreme Russophobia. Excerpt quote: General Reinhard Gehlen, former head of Nazi intelligence operations against the Soviets, was hired by the U.S. Army and later by the CIA to operate 600 ex-Nazi agents in the Soviet zone of occupied Germany. In 1948, CIA Director Roscoe Hillenkoetter assumed control of the so-called Gehlen Organization, CIA.gov. The World Shadow Government itself, which directs the clandestine leadership in the Vatican, the City of London, and the District of Columbia, is behind every move. The global control matrix, which overlays the entire planetary civilization, is also deeply involved in every aspect of this black operation to unseat a sitting POTUS and overthrow a Russian president. The globalist New World Order agenda, which has been operating in the background for centuries, hinges upon the strict adherence to some key organizing principles. The central organizing principle, which is always followed religiously by the secret NWO ruling cabal, concerns the strict maintenance of the perpetual war economy. toward that end, world peace can never be achieved. Rather, only the false notion that peace may be attained at some magical moment in the future is ever projected. Consequently, the imaginary split between East and West is always exploited to the max by the ruling cabal. The East is just far and foreign enough, relative to the West, that it can always be successfully set up as the fictitious boogeyman. Russia. The landmass of the Russian motherland is not only the largest on Earth, it's also the only country that stretches from the Far East to the West. Given this geopolitical reality, Russia naturally serves as the bridge between East and West. Russian society and culture, traditions and customs, philosophy and religions come from both the East and the West. As both the land bridge and the diplomatic bridge between East and West, Russia's fundamental role is to unify and reconcile humankind. The Great Game, initiated by the British Empire centuries ago, and perpetuated by the present US-UK Empire, is an ongoing attempt to sabotage the great destiny of Russia. Because Russia is so heavily influenced by Eastern philosophy and spirituality, its current leadership has much patience and forbearance. Putin et al. Were well aware of every attempt to wreck and ruin Russia, as well as diminish its standing within the world community of nations. Putin's Russia has been preparing and practicing for this intensifying global conflict for many years, and as the motherland has over decades before him. Hence, the present Kremlin leadership is undaunted by the endless saber-rattling by the West. They know that empty cans make the most noise. The World Wars. Each of the world wars was intentionally staged and planned well before their actual occurrence. Both wars were in actuality major moves within the context of the Great Game. The global geopolitical chessboard was profoundly rearranged at the end of each world war. For example, both World War I and II were quite instrumental in paving the way for the illegal establishment of the modern state of Israel. World War I was precisely engineered to keep Germany and Russia from forming either a political alliance and/or an economic union. Both bilateral arrangements would have spelled disaster for Anglo-American hegemony, which had been well established by 1914 through British imperialism. However, it was the purposeful weakening of Russia by the ravages of World War I from 1914 through 17, which set the stage for the Bolshevik Revolution. That fake Russian Revolution was manufactured by a collaboration of London and New York City banksters at the direction of their Illuminati overlords. The very purpose of the unrelenting Great Game is not only to completely control the four corners of Russia, but also to exploit its vast supply of natural resources and manpower. The notorious slave labor camps known as the Gulag Archipelago was established to accomplish both of these objectives. Soviet communism was then painstakingly set up high in the international firmament as the global boogeyman which must be resisted by all democracy-loving people. In this way, the future National Socialists of Germany would be used to further antagonize the Marxist communists of the Soviet Union as a means of keeping both countries alienated from each other. According to a fastidiously designed blueprint, World War II was the second global conflict devised to keep Russia and Germany apart. Both Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin were carefully groomed by their handlers to take opposite sides during the Second Great War. There's no better way to prevent a natural alliance between two emerging superpowers than to instigate an epic war between them. The ensuing Cold War provided the perfect pretext for the military-industrial complex to become deeply entrenched throughout all the major Western powers. Once the deep state was inaugurated, the perpetual war economy would never run out of wars to fight. In this fashion, the West and the East would be forever pitted against each other right up to the present day. The fall of the Berlin Wall. The most unacknowledged byproduct of the fall of the Berlin Wall is that it facilitated the immediate liberalization of Russia, as well as all of the former republics and satellites of the USSR. This pre-planned neoliberal scheme was expeditiously implemented in order to indoctrinate all the concerned nations for the coming predatory capitalism. The populace of each country was told that the predatory capitalists from the West were there to show them the right way to run an economy, as well as their governments. In actuality, the new class of oligarchs, both homegrown and foreign, only arrived to steal the wealth of each target nation, as well as the hard assets of the citizen owners. This pervasive dynamic of plundering, pillaging, and raping all of the former states, which comprised the USSR, continued until the very day that Vladimir Putin was handed the reins of government by President Boris Yeltsin. The relentless campaign against Putin essentially began the very day he left the neoliberal reservation and started taking back what was stolen from Russia. He also began the process of national social transformation by gradually bringing Russia back to its conservative roots. As a matter of historical fact, all of the largest Eastern societies are quite conservative by tradition and values. Russia, China, India, and as well as the other nations of the East share common beliefs and core principles which are profoundly antithetical to the ultra-liberalization of the West. The very purpose of imposing Marxist communism by the Anglo-American banksters on Russia and China was to erode the long-held conservatism and genuine religiosity of those peoples. The same attempt was made in India, which leaned toward Russia and China throughout the Cold War. However, Mahatma Gandhi short-circuited that subversive NWO plot overseen by the British. The BRICS Alliance. Because India successfully threw off the yoke of British imperialism under Gandhi's leadership, the Western powers' divide and conquer conspiracy revealed itself as never before. The imposed partitioning of Pakistan exposed what the leaders of the BRICS nations have always known, that divide and rule would forever be the control mechanism used by the Anglo-American Axis, AAA, to dominate planet Earth. The formation of the BRICS Economic Union, at the urging of Vladimir Putin, represents the single greatest threat to the US-UK empire. The unification of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa constitutes such a danger to the NWO agenda that their intelligence agencies were ordered to come up with a plan to destroy the BRICS Association. The fairly recent coup d'etat in Brazil is just one conspiratorial plot that was hatched to achieve that goal. There are literally hundreds of plots afoot to torpedo the BRICS flagship, Russia. After all, it was Putin who stepped into the role of point man for this extremely dangerous but liberating project. Because of this extraordinary act of self-sacrifice, he has been resoundingly vilified throughout the Western mainstream media. Likewise, his every peace initiative has been misrepresented as warmongering by his neocon nemesis, when it is they who are the incessant war makers. Most of the MSM-generated propaganda is disseminated so as to stop the decline of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency since the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement. The dollar stands to lose the most as the BRICS cease using it for the international transactions. The transitioning away from the greenback for oil and gas purchases is the single greatest threat to the US dollar, and it's the very reason why so many countries in the Middle East have been attacked by various nations belonging to the Anglo-American Axis. Those that were victims of unprovoked aggression by AAA militaries simply took serious initiatives to decouple from the US dollar. Armageddon in the Mideast. This ever-unfolding Armageddon in the Middle East, especially throughout the northern Levant, is yet another ploy by the AAA leadership to continue their perpetual war economy. Not only did they hope to further the Greater Israel project, coordinated by Israel and quietly advocated by the Sunni-backed governments in the region, such as Saudi Arabia, they also hoped to take control of all the oil and gas resources in the Mideast. It's no wonder, then, that extensive areas would be transformed into a dystopian, post-apocalyptic wasteland. This was all done by design in order to remove the indigenous peoples from their ancestral lands. Only in this manner could the corporate coveted lands be freed up for unbridled oil and gas exploration and development. Except that one day the Russian military showed up as a skunk at the picnic. If there's one transgression that the neocon cabal will never forgive or forget, it is Russia's unanticipated entry into the Syrian theater of war. This sole act of defiance by President Putin showed the whole world that the combined US and NATO war machine wasn't nearly as invincible as it appeared to be. Putin's generals ran roughshod over the CIA-trained ISIS terrorist and al-Nusra Front mercenaries. Actually, they first ensured their military success by totally controlling the airspace above ISIL, raining bombs and missiles on their most strategic strongholds and supply lines. By overwhelming Daesh positions all over Syria, Putin's generals basically blew up the Greater Israel project for the rest of this decade and beyond. In so doing, the entire NWO agenda has been significantly curtailed. No other individual can be given so much credit as Putin for throwing a wrench in the Zio-Anglo-American juggernaut. The cabal has gotten so desperate that they have been using Saudi Arabia to carry out all sorts of military operations, e.g. Yemen, as well as terror attacks whenever and wherever they are needed. With this understanding of Putin's role in the prevention of totalitarian one-world government via the ever-funding NWO agenda, it should be clear why the cabal forever crucifies him in the press. Truly, Vladimir Putin is a personification of everything the New World Order is working hard to destroy. He is at once a nationalist president and a genuine peacemaker, a spiritually advanced leader and a world-class statesman, a master chessman and rugged individualist. In short, Vlad scares the hell out of the neocon cabal. Trump and Putin. It ought to be self-evident by now as to why the same cabal is so very afraid of a Trump-Putin compact. They know that a USA-Russia detente would even be more deadly to their misguided plans than a German-Russian alliance. Were President Trump to take his intentions one step further, a Russo-American accord would guarantee that the New World Order agenda would effectively be terminated. Given the multi-century crime spree committed by those at the very peak of the pinnacle of the world's shadow government, they understand that they would eventually be arrested and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The world's premier law enforcement agencies possess untold volumes of hard evidence of crimes against humanity in the forms of countless war crimes, several premeditated genocides, and numerous acts of state-sponsored terrorism. The members of the cabal, both covert decision-makers at the top and overt collaborators in the middle, know that they are all facing unprecedented existential threats, and that they must use every ruse and stratagem to nullify those threats. Therefore, they simply fall back on what they have always done best and assert that the Russians are coming. After all, the Russian Red Scare has worked like a charm for many decades, so why should it fail now? However, what the cabal has quite deceitfully failed to tell the people is that it is they who represent the real Red Scare of the third millennium. Their one world government is nothing but a supranational and tyrannical ruling body that is answerable to no one save its hidden masters. Their furtive plans are all carried out to turn the whole world into a monolithic communistic superstate. Their future unelected totalitarian government is closely modeled after the European Union's, which has proven to be the bane of existence for countries and citizens all over the continent of Europe. Where is this all going? Now, the reader can better comprehend why there is so much propaganda spewed at Russia and outright lies written and told about Putin. Because Trump cuts a similar profile to his Russian counterpart, he has been hoisted even higher in the public square and made the victim of non-stop ridicule and unwarranted persecution. Deep State is now clearly on the defensive as it takes every offensive measure it can think of to neutralize both Putin and Trump. By fabricating one accusation after another against Trump, they hope to keep him in the state of constant agitation, and forcing his entire administration to fight one fire after another. Team Trump will eventually succumb to political PTSD, which eventually paralyzes as it incapacitates. Similarly, the agents of Deep State will continue to launch one allegation after another against Putin's Russia. They then follow up on these unproven violations of international law by imposing economic sanctions and financial constraints, which constitute the cold phase of World War III in order to soften up the Russian people. The neocon cabal knows that their only hope is to trigger a hot phase of a full-blown World War III. This is why they have pushed Putin so hard with black operations like murdering Russia's top diplomats and ambassadors. Who is killing all the Russian diplomats? It's important to point out that the Anglo-American Axis is merely following the exact same playbook that they used as a prelude to starting World Wars I and II, with the planned election of warmonger Hillary Clinton. The cabal had hoped to finally push the world into a World War III scenario. It really does appear that they never counted on Donald J. Trump showing up and being ready for active duty as Commander-in-Chief. Key point, it's a historical fact that Democratic administrations have been used to start and prosecute the world wars as well as most of the regional wars since 1900. Clinton and Podesta. As always, there are several levels of intrigue going on simultaneously wherever Deep State undertakes such an all-consuming global operation as the Russian hack PSYOP. The sheer domination of the daily news cycle by Russia this, Russia that, is always a reflection of what TPTB really do fear the most. However, there is also a purely political point being scored with this completely contrived Russophobia black op. Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign chairman was John Podesta. Both Clinton and Podesta have gone down in U.S. presidential election history as two of the biggest losers of all time. Bear in mind that this was Clinton's second humiliating loss after being blindsided by Barack Obama in 2008. Not only did these two very bad losers need a very good excuse for all the livid donors, who were also desperate for a story that would pacify their ultra-sensitive and still crying liberal base. There are actually multiple reasons why these two characters require the excuse of the millennium as to why they just got trounced by Trump. The very best they could come up with was the Russian election hack. This false accusation led to the baseless conclusion that the election was hacked by the Russians and therefore the Democrats were powerless in defeat even though no such thing happened. This gave Podesta, especially, something very big to talk about at a time when his direct involvement with Pizzagate was being virally exposed in the worldwide alt media and then to a lesser extent by the MSM. Once Pizzagate was exposed as Podesta's Achilles heel, he became like a wounded animal, thrashing about in sheer desperation. This is when the anti-Russian campaign was really ratcheted up, because the very future of the Democratic Party was hanging in the balance, as was his political fate. Clinton also needed to blame anyone but herself, being the most inferior and corrupt, caustic and unlikable, offensive and dangerous, mean-spirited and vengeful presidential candidate in U.S. history. How she ever even got the nomination can only be explained by the staunch support she received from the warmongering neocons. They prepared her, over the course of her entire career, to be the POTUS who would wage war on Russia, even if it meant going nuclear on them. Key point, HRC was actually disqualified from holding any public office based on her own admissions of fact. Most expediently, the concocted Russian hacking narrative by Podesta perfectly plays into the neocon machination to provoke Russia into a regional war, e.g. Ukraine, on the way to triggering full-scale World War III. The war propaganda also feeds into their desire for massive war profiteering in the form of gun running, human trafficking, drug smuggling, artifact black marketeering, oil theft, and other illicit enterprises which are easily covered up in the fog of war. Lastly, this Russian hacking approach, the neocons hope, will afford them the opportunity to again take back the motherland from the Russian people. The neocon cabal longs for the day when they can complete their Russia exploitation project via their oligarchs, agents of predatory capitalism, and the draconian application of neoliberal economics. What follows is the backstory to this multi-decade conspiratorial movement that has brought so much death and destruction to Russia for a century, as well as to the world at large. The bottom line here is that neither Clinton nor Podesta would take any blame whatsoever for their epic failure. Clinton herself had issued many anti-Russian screeds during the debates in order to smear Trump, so it was a very convenient excuse when they were soundly defeated at the polls. It was a well-known fact that criminally insane psychopaths will never assume responsibility for their misconduct and/or unlawful actions. When such bad actors enter politics, their incorrigible criminal behavior mixes with those of similar ilk, and then all hell can break loose as it is across America today. This link explains the surreptitious process of polarization in much greater detail. Deep State. Because of so many unanticipated eventualities, the agents of Deep State are working triple time to sow seeds of chaos and confusion everywhere and anywhere. As it's as though Pandora's box has been opened in every nation on earth, wherein each is now plagued with so much political pandemonium and social mayhem, economic instability, and financial insecurity. In light of this rapidly devolving predicament, it's more essential than ever for President Trump and President Putin to meet face-to-face in order to meet this extraordinary global challenge. The world is truly at a crossroad. It can follow the neocons to more war, or the righteous leaders to an enduring peace. The current generation has never witnessed two presidents of the two superpowers willing to sit down with each other in a mutually respectful manner. This alone bodes well for humanity. Now, if only they can be compelled by their good conscience to speak to each other as members of the Universal Brotherhood. Remember, Deep State knows that it will be like the Titanic colliding with the iceberg, should Trump and Putin cooperate to expose the real beast that has terrorized the planet for so long. And deep state will be the Titanic. Should enough people wake up to this unfolding reality, everything can change in a day and a night. There is nothing so strong and formidable as people power in this age of populist movements and authentic revolutions. Therefore, the real mission here is to enlighten as many people as possible before things really get out of control, so we move past the point of no return. Special note, the real benefit of Trump's victory is that the focus of deep state has been shifted from Russia and Germany to Trump and Putin. Enormous amounts of time, energy, and resources had been directed to degrading the Russo-German relationship. Now, the neocon warmongers have been compelled to sabotage the US-Russian with all deliberate speed to avert the utter collapse of their NWO implementation plan. No matter what the POTUS does or does not do, the Trump movement has squared off against the purple revolutionaries who ignorantly blame Russia for Hillary's historic loss. This exceedingly polarizing dynamic alone should serve as an insurance policy against Trump being neoconned into war with Russia. Also, there's this, how Trump averted World War III. Conclusion. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin must schedule a summit meeting post-haste before the U.S. president is so undercut that he no longer has the power to proceed toward a durable peace. The American people have no quarrel with the Russian people, nor do the Russians have any disagreements with Americans. It is rogue elements within the U.S. government that have stoked the divisions that separate both countries. Likewise, it is the malevolent neocon factions within the deep state that seek to advance the doomed NWO agenda. Which is why Trump has no choice but to knock down the three primary pillars of deep state. Trump cannot allow a fake Russian conspiracy to keep him from his stated mission. He said many times on the campaign trail that there was no reason not to make peace with Russia, and Trump asked why anyone would ever want war with a nuclear superpower. Putin is his own man and quite willing to meet with Trump. The vast majority of his people only want peace and goodwill between the two nations. Given these true circumstances, there is no reason why Putin and Trump cannot bring the world together under one big tent marked by mutual respect and goodwill. Since both are professed Christians, there is plenty of common religious ground upon which to convene their historic peacemaking venture. Please, gentlemen, let's get busy. State of the Nation, March 17, 2017.